Good morning, and welcome to the second day of the study day on Russia, China, and others, looking at our review of issues of misinformation and disinformation efforts in the Sahel. Once again, I want to welcome all of you to this second day and to thank you for being on time. The event for today will be more of moderated session. We're going to have a paper presented by Ambassador Piazzi beside me. After him, we're going to have 3 moderated sections. Knowing that the last day is always the day everybody is quick to either get to the airport, we're going to stick to time based on the program we have here. Secondly, like I said yesterday, we'll try to be as more engaging as possible so that folks are able to make their contribution, which will go into our recommendation. Don't worry, I'm not going to go line by line asking people to make contribution, but I want people to, as much as possible, to come up with informed recommendation that we are going to put in our report. And thank you. And again, just as part of our own piece of information, we understand the attack yesterday in Turkey, and to the director and our brothers from Turkey, and to those who lost their life in the attack, we say may their soul rest in peace. And as we all work towards having returning peace to the entire world, it's important that we continue to watch out and be each other's keeper. Amen. So I will go straight to the event of today, which is to first to invite the ambassador to present his paper.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to everyone. I join you in our heartfelt condolences to the people of Turkey for the ignominious terrorist attack yesterday at the aerospace industry. It was really something that must be inquired and see what they did and the guilty brought to justice. Said so, I have a technical speech and I will go through it. But very briefly after that, I will open also in the discussion with you, one point. Why is it so easy for disinformation propaganda coming from Russia, coming from China, to find such a fertile ground? It's not by chance. And that's where I would like to bring the diplomatic, the political side in the discussion, not only the technical thing, what is fake news and so on. So before starting, we have a very short video for those of you who are not familiar with the PAM, what is a parliamentary assembly, what do we do in particular. We are reviewing this video, but to give you a brief idea of how we are structured and how we operate.
Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, PAM, is an international parliamentary organization. Established by the national parliaments of the Euro-Mediterranean region. It has 34 founding and associate member states and several candidate partner countries. Membership is open to Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf region countries and to those which have an interest and role in the region. PAM is the center of excellence and a unique forum for regional parliamentary diplomacy. The main objective of PAM is to forge political, economic, and social cooperation among the member states, find common solutions to the many challenges facing the region, create a space for peace and prosperity for people. PAM conducts its work through President, Bureau, International Secretariat, standing committees. The current Secretary General is Ambassador Sergio Piazzi. PAM's 3 standing committees cover political and security-related cooperation and regional stability, economic, social, and environmental cooperation, development, and partnership, dialogue among civilizations and human rights. PAM may also set up working groups, ad hoc committees, or special task forces. PAM Special Parliamentary Committee on Counterterrorism, PAM Economic Panel, PAM Academic Platform, PAM Woman Parliamentary Forum. PAM serves the parliamentary division of the 5+5 West Mediterranean Forum. Mediterranean Day. PAM addressed many issues of common interest: counterterrorism, confidence building, peace support, conflict resolution, Middle East peace process, mass migration, free trade and investments, economic integration, climate change, energy, human rights, dialogue of civilizations, interfaith cooperation, education, gender issues, etc. The main operational and coordination instruments of PAM in these fields are electoral observation teams, Cairo election mission, Istanbul election mission, Syria, Libya, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. The PAM holds its plenary sessions annually, hosted by a member state, to discuss the reports and draft solutions prepared by 3 committees. PAM Award to award individuals, organizations, and institutions who have demonstrated a strong and visible commitment, outstanding achievement, and active promotion of PAM ideals. PAM was granted a permanent observer status to the General Assembly of the United Nations in recognition of its excellent work. PAM participates annually in the UN General Assembly with a high-level delegation. PAM participates annually in the WBIMF sessions in Washington with a high-level delegation. PAM fully participates in today's regional and international ministerial and thematic debates regarding the main challenges and opportunities facing the region and the world. Member states
This is little outdated, but it gives an idea of how we operate. The topic of this meeting today is a major importance for PAM, and I thank all the expert organization for having exchanged strategic information insight on how to respond to the threat by malinformation and fake news. And yesterday for me was extremely useful. I have to underline this. Fake news, misinformation, and disinformation are phenomena rapidly spreading all over the world, creating a new dimension of confrontation in the virtual domain to be answered blow by blow. And we are looking at the parliamentary dimension of that. And I will come later on this because we are working very closely with UN Security Council on this topic. This phenomenon not only target vulnerable countries with weak foundation and fragile social fabric, but also democratic institutions. Beyond the Sahel, you saw what is happening with the election in Europe, in the US, most recently in Moldova, and we will soon see what happening for the 4th parliamentary election in Georgia. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Operation Overlord, a Russian operation which will affect the United States. So this is something that also we look at it and how to get prepared for what the European side, the Mediterranean side is concerned. The fast-paced evolution of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies available for use by state, but also by terrorist group, criminal network, and non-state actor exponentially increase the spread and damage of misinformation and disinformation can do. That is the reason why the international community is urged to act immediately toward the regularization and the utilization and the normative of artificial intelligence and emerging technology to prevent and avoid further weaponization of information. PAM is strongly support any initiative aiming at reaching this goal, working first and foremost with the UN, but also, I have to say, with the private sector. Without the private sector, there is no hope to achieve any concrete results. PAM has been monitoring the development occurring in the Sahel since many years now. You know that the country of the Sahel are neighbors of the PAM southern member state, and any event in the Sahel has direct impact on the security of the whole Euro-Mediterranean and the Gulf regions. The UN Secretary General has openly stated that the Sahel is today the new epicenter of global terrorism. Yet, not only terrorists, but also criminal and mercenary groups, as well as autocratic regimes, notably Russia, China, and Iran, were able to exploit the drivers of instability in the region, taking advantage of, among others, local conflict, environmental degradation, food insecurity, migration, and the fragility of institutions to advance their interests, including promoting anti-Western sentiments. Our parliamentarians have been in the forefront to address instability in Sahel by cooperating with ECOWAS and the UN Special Envoys for Sahel and West Africa. 3 years ago, in 2021, PAM, together with the Interparliamentary Union, the G5 Sahel Interparliamentary Committee, and the Arab Parliament, launched the so-called Call of the Sahel. Through this initiative, parliamentarians were intending to renew a global commitment to strengthen cooperation with the Sahel countries and their people. And many, many times you heard also when Tajani was the president of the European Parliament about a Marshall Plan for Africa, for Sahel, but it never took off. Since then, the situation has dramatically changed in a region that witnessed a wave of coup d'etat. All these coup d'etat have raised urgent questions for the international community on which are the national and regional counterpart to work with, particularly from our point of view on counterterrorism and support the development and well-being of local communities. This is an old story. I tell you that already in meetings years ago with the UN special envoys, when we spoke of the Sahel, they said we have huge international conference, billions of dollars pledged to help the country of the Sahel, and we made the case of Niger. Only 10% of the pledges for funds for development ever materialized, 10%. And those 10% were used to pay the Niger army to control the border against illegal migrations. So you understand that there were no funds for development in the region. Most went to the military. You know that the military junta in Sahel have terminated a number of security and military agreements with the European Union, European states, the US, and the withdrawal from the region has left a gap that has been immediately filled in by the others. In addition, the Barkhane operation, MINUSMA, and the G5 Sahel have since been closed, and now countries in the Sahel are even arguing that ECOWAS no longer serves their interest. And now we know that the juntas have immediately created the Alliance for Sahel, which is a military alliance with different purposes. In this vacuum, the military junta are largely counting on and benefiting from the support and protection of the Russian Federation. Especially the military junta use their ties with the Russian authorities in order to differentiate themselves from the West and the colonial past. Keep this in mind, because this is something that will be important to raise before. In Niger, following the coup d'etat in 2023, protests were held against the French embassy in Niamey to cry, "Long life Putin, long life Russia." In the slide, you can see there are murals in Burkina Faso, which display the strong relation between the country and the Russian Federation. And in another slide, you see a very funny video produced by Nigerian rappers to celebrate Putin's birthday. There is nice music.
Dans la nuit sombre, il reste éveillé. Vladimir Poutine qui roule, stratégie en tech, il joue sa partie pour son peuple, il donne son élargie. Vladimir Poutine qui roule. rien ne l'arrête, même dans la foule. Vladimir Poutine qui roule, les garçons qui a pas de trêve, pas de sap.
It is long, so we made the birthday short. The influence of the Russian Federation in the Sahel has begun a long time ago and only reinforced by the presence of the Wagner Group, which only brought more death and violence in those countries. At the present, after the death of Prigozhin, the group has been rebranded, and the new Africa Corps report directly to the Russian Ministry of Defense, although the Wagner Group itself is still present in some countries of the African continent. You know about the aircraft accident a few days ago in Sudan, shot down by the rebels, which took off from the Emirates with the Russian crew and weapons on board, possibly either directed in Sudan or to Burkina. We don't know yet. But it shows that the link goes beyond the propaganda, and we are looking at Sahel. I think we should also look what is going on in the GCC, because also there, if you hear what the news are, not only from Al Jazeera, but also the other, is important because it is a direct influence immediately. Under the Africa Corps, the African Initiative was established, defined as the Russian new agency about events on the African continents, with a particular focus on the neo-colonial legacy that African countries have been struggling with for decades, as well as on the activities of the Russian military, business, doctors, and journalists in Africa. The African Initiative is led by Viktor Lukovenko from Uzbekistan, a former agenda in the propaganda network of the Wagner Group. Telegram channels of the African Initiative gather more than 60,000 subscribers today. Moreover, it has offices in Burkina and Mali, and in the school of this country, friendship lessons are organized where students are taught about Russian history, play football matches preceded by the Russian national anthem, and hold a graffiti festival where participants draw pictures of Putin. The African Initiative has also sponsored several press tours of African journalists and influencers to visit Moscow headquarters as well as the illegally occupied region of Ukraine. Overall, according to the African Center for Strategic Studies, disinformation campaigns in Africa are quadrupled from 2022. The Russian Federation was responsible for 40% of them. This has terrible consequence, taking into consideration that 300 million Africans have joined social media in the last 10 years. You already saw these slides yesterday. Also, AFRICOM was hit by fake news with the publication on Twitter of a fake internal memo following the visit of AFRICOM commander in Libya, saying that General Haftar is arrogant, aiming at undermining constructive developments between AFRICOM and Libya. Another example of the Russian propaganda is the recent article released by Sputnik News about how nice and good are the leader of the Chad military junta, recently named the prime minister, having renounced his salary to help citizens. By the way, this message was made for each and individual leader of the coup d'etat countries. Unfortunately, by now, the plan of the Russian Federation in the Sahel are producing the expected results. Russia, through the deployment of its controlled mercenary on the ground, is exploiting huge potential of the African continent in terms of mineral resources and energy sector. You know that the gold from Mali was used to pay, Russia used the gold from Mali to pay Iran for the supply of 6,000 drones. This was a very recent operation. Coming to China, is the second largest sponsor of disinformation in Africa, and its campaigns are managed directly by the state-controlled media. Xinhua, China Daily, China Radio International, the CGTN, Star Times, and a Chinese-owned media company has become Africa's second largest digital TV provider with 20 million streaming subscribers, and is invested over $2 billion in digital TV infrastructure across 30 African countries. Again, China is portraying itself as an alternative to Western country in the Sahel, mainly advancing its economic interests as well as engaging national security companies as a kind of Chinese Africa core. But these are directly protecting the investment, the plants, the fields owned by China. According to the Observer Research Foundation, a think tank based in India, three are the pillars of the information campaign of China and Africa. First, it hosts and train African media professionals each year, teach them to promote Chinese investment as a positive force. Iran is also present in Sahel, establishing a number of agreements, especially with Burkina, Mali, and Niger. This kind of agreement range from strengthening military and security cooperation to promote cultural exchanges and opening Iranian-affiliated university. In this context of severe insecurity, I wish to share with you some of the action that PAM is undertaking to promote and complement the efforts of the international community. Our experts have just completed a draft report on the malicious use of AI and emerging technology by terrorist and criminal groups. This work has been requested to us by the UN Security Council Counterterrorism Executive Directorate, and now we are going through the peer review of which NATO colleagues are part, and I'm thankful to you for your help. We are also issuing, and it will be public very soon, a daily digest of all AI-related information, particularly for what concerns the malicious use. And we have established a global parliamentary observatory on AI in our office in San Marino. We are also working at the present two other reports. One is the resilience of democratic system in relation to the misuse of AI and new technology. The other one, also at the request of the Security Council, parliamentary oversight of use of spyware by state and non-state actors, which is very delicate, as you can imagine. Then next December, I will assume the presidency of the UN Coordination Mechanism of Parliamentary Assembly on Counterterrorism. And I'm sure that will be an interesting experience in order to streamline the work of the assemblies, but it will be a challenging job because some Russian MPs are represented through some of the Asian parliamentary assemblies. This is what I wanted to say from a technical point of view. Then, with your permission, Chairman, why is so easy for the Russian-Chinese narrative to penetrate, to find such a fertile ground in the Sahel, not only in the Sahel? For years, our generation came out of the Second World War. It's the era of decolonization. So whatever was colonial before is bad. And then you had the neocolonialism, which is very much economic. We are looking at a number of countries which are francophone. You remember that in West Africa and in the Sahel, and there are very interesting article, video, film, you could not move a finger if Total was not in agreement. If you wanted to meet the head of state of one of these countries, you had to ask the CEO of Total, the representative for Africa, or for that specific country. We had even case very, very recently where the presence of Western diplomat, advisors, military, created a tension in between the Europeans themselves. You remember, just before the coup d'etat in Niger, France made objection to the presence of Italian soldiers. That is very simple. It shows how we were fragmented in terms of our presence in those countries. And more we are divided, easy we make the game for the others. Look also intellectually. In the United Nations, most of my colleagues from West Africa, in particular, all studied in University in Moscow. They all speak Russian. It's very easy to interact. Also, the other operation that make weak us also from a defense point of view. The Russians use bases in Algeria for their fleet when they move. Not to speak about the Tartus in Syria. Huh? We know it, all of us. Morocco, a standing reference for the democracy, the Western group, has an agreement with Russia for the nuclear power plant. Egypt, a couple of weeks ago, bought 200,000 tons of wheat from Russia. Egypt, a few weeks ago, bought the new jet fighter, the latest generation, from China, not from the US, not from France, not from Sweden, not from Russia, from China. So you see how deep is the connection. Why artificial intelligence find a very fertile ground to spread, and what the EU is doing, what the European, the America, what we are doing. One of the key issues, which is maybe rooted in our principles, I speak as European, I will not give you €1, $1 of humanitarian aid which is not conditional. I give you the money if you make your constitutional reform. I give you €1 if you don't change your democratic system of elections. We give conditional aid. Russia and China don't care. I help you. I have access to your mind. I protect the military junta. You do what you want at home. You understand how easy is the game. And that's where we have to reflect about the penetration of the information, because it's very easy. Remember what I said of Niger, of the huge amount of $1 million pledged for development, only 10% materialized, and it went to the army to protect the border. So where is compared to the investment from China, what is Europe doing? What are we offering? You have from Italy now this model of Piano Mattei, the Mattei plan, which is on cooperation. But clearly, it is a drop in the ocean. The amount of money is good, but limited to some bilateral. And why Piano Mattei was born? Not only to have a market from some Italian product, but to replace the Russian fuel after the sanctions. We need new supplies to fill the gap. And Italy was much faster than Germany and other countries, as you know. So I would like to leave it here, and then I will be happy to answer some questions if there are some. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we are still right on time. We could take 2 questions, 3 questions if we can. And for me, I think the presentation was apt. It was direct. It was straight to the point. But it would be good to take 2 more questions so he's able to elaborate on 1 or 2 things.
Brigadier General, Up Director, Ambassador, thank you. It was a pleasure for us to hear your perspective. I want to ask you the question. I know that there are so many challenges in the region in terms of development, governance, fighting with information, disinformation, misinformation. And I don't think there is a simple solution for any of it. But where would you start, or what is your recommendation will be to start for either European Union or any kind of external actor that wants to help the Sahelian countries?
Any other questions so that I could merge them?
Thank you, Ambassador, for the presentation. It's a bit of a technical question. You referred to artificial intelligence. So I was wondering whether the report or the work the Institute has done on artificial intelligence, looking at how artificial intelligence is, let's say, a weapon or threat in terms of disinformation, misinformation, or also whether it can be used in order, to protect us from this sort of threat, and whether there is a possibility of having the private sector that does, the artificial intelligence programs and everything as an ally, because it's a company, it's, involves money, it involves open code, it involves how you develop large language models in the near future. So I was wondering, I really found it interesting whether you could elaborate a bit on that. Thank you.
Can I add the last one?
Please.
Which is on, I love the issue of private sector that you brought in your discussion. And it's important for us to know that one of the key issues in Sahel or in Africa is lack of job for young persons. And my question might be, can we have a strategy that allow primary resources in Africa, companies from Europe to invest in at least converting those primary resources to secondary material where you have a lot of people to have job? And I think you might start changing orientation. What's your view?
Thank you for the three very interesting and different, parallel but different questions. Let me start from the last one. In April, I was at the World Bank for the spring session, and we were talking with the Director General of World Bank and the IMF. He gave us one data. By the end of the century, there will be in the African continent 1 billion young people looking for jobs. Today, the offer of jobs in Africa is below the 400 million, 350, 400. What happened to the other 600 million? What happened? So the answer is, you say, unless you have a civil war, unless you have a mass biblical migration, the answer is to invest in Africa, to create a job, to create the condition for people to live their life in dignity, giving a prospect also for their children. This is what the World Bank is prospecting. It's true that in Europe, in Asia itself, we have a decline in the growth. For the first time in the world trend, the population is going to decrease. But nevertheless, we have 600 million people who will need to work, to eat, to live, and to give hope and decency for their families. And this comes with what General was saying in terms of development. I mentioned years ago, President Tajani, before becoming Foreign Minister of Italy, he was the President of the European Parliament. He advocated for a Marshall Plan for Africa. No one ever listened to it. We had the little Italian bilateral cooperation, the French, the Dutch, the British. But first of all, there was no synergy in this investment. Then they could not compete with the Chinese. With all the problem we have also for China. At the United Nations, I tell you, we have many cases of countries which are not able anymore to pay the loan from China, or where the investment of China were overrated, and the UN and the International Tribunal had to intervene. The highway in Montenegro is a very clear case, but we have in Africa the same. So you cannot pay, I take your natural resources to repay. So the UN had to help this country to renegotiate the debt. So unless there is a very synchronized, harmonious decision to invest in the development, and few weeks ago, I was in New York for the Summit of the Future with head of state, the Secretary General, and then the Pact of the Future, which was agreed there. Unless that is implemented, we don't have the answer. We can have the intellectual idea, but not the tools to implement it. And so far, as you can see, what is happening in Sahel, it's a war of proximity. It's a clash between the West on one side and the autocratic states on the other side, where little bit like Lebanon is the battlefield for Iran. Africa is the clash between West and East on who will control the resources. Because in the end, it's a war for resources, uranium and gold, the other mining, the rare earths, and that is what is happening now. And all this under the chapeau, if you want, of ideology, because it will not end there. This country don't apply the sanctions. The same I mentioned the GCC. You can buy everything Russian you want in the GCC. You can export everything you want to Russia or through Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. I give you the example of Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan export to Russia or import from the West have moved from 3%, about 3 years ago, to 150% now. Do you think Kyrgyzstan consumes so much stuff, knowing what is the economy of Kyrgyzstan? Or the laundry of crypto values in the Gulf? So you see, there is now, we made a report, very interesting, we can share with you on how Russia and Iran are circumventing the sanctions with all the shadow fleet and all these companies which help to facilitate the movement of stuff and money, even through using Venezuela on the other side of the world. So this is extremely important, and we follow that. But the answer is, if there will be no development, the situation can only deteriorate. And you are totally right, General. So we need, and in the United Nations now, the system is paralyzed. You have a Security Council that doesn't deliberate. Veto here, veto there. What there is one positive advantage of this stall in the Security Council: an increased role of General Assembly. Because if something doesn't pass in the Security Council, then the General Assembly vote. And that is something that is making people thinking. And we have seen that is useful also to push for some or remind some obligations. So you see, that is happening. And that's why no one of the country with the veto power wants to give it up. But the discussion is going on. And one of the chapters of the Summit of the Future, there were 5 chapters, was the reform of global governance. And we are following that track particularly. And our idea is to see how national parliament will monitor and follow what their countries are doing in terms of what was agreed at the Summit of the Future. And the importance, I give one example of the importance of General Assembly. We were in New York at the opening of the Summit of the Future. Just before the summit start, but I'm speaking of 5 minutes, the Russian ambassador raised the hand and he tried to block everything. 5 minutes before, said, this paper is worth nothing. We don't agree with the content. It was not discussed. He tried to do something. In that moment, and I wanted to say hello to a great diplomat, the ambassador of Congo stand up. The ambassador of Congo stand up in New York and says, at the General Assembly, somebody who know the rule of the United Nations very clearly and say, I ask to vote immediately the Assembly if we should discuss the Russian proposal. All the members of the General Assembly, except the famous 7, voted in favor of the demand of Congo, and Russia was sided out. It was all this in 5 minutes. And then the meeting started, and the summit of the future was able to deliver the pact for the future. So you see, the General Assembly has taken the authority we had before. The secretary, the president of GA was the ambassador of Trinidad, correct? Or Francis, who prepared all this, and then was the ambassador of Cameroon who take over the president of GA just a few days before. And Congo was fantastic. He really, in 5 minutes, he blocked Russia, and Russia was isolated by all members of the United Nations. So this is something that is interesting to keep in mind. What will be the role of if the GA will reappropriate its role in international governance. Now, the artificial intelligence, the private sector. I give you an example. I was in a meeting on artificial intelligence organized within the Council of Europe. And there was the senior expert from the International Atomic Energy Agency, an Austrian gentleman who put beautiful picture of the Pentagon and an explosion on the corner. He said, this is AI generated. The artificial intelligence makes sure that there would be no code that this is a fake picture. And he said for the US themselves, it took 4 hours to understand that there was no explosion in the Pentagon. Now the issue is how to regulate that. And the only answer we got today was from the private sector, those who manage this huge platform, we are talking of Meta, Microsoft, etc., to code the document and code the picture. This is real, not real. We were talking to the professor Derrick de Kirchhoven, who is senior expert of the MIT. The guy is 80 years old. He's one of the top experts in language and machine. He said, there is no artificial intelligence. The computer, the internet, has stored what we people put inside in the last 40 years. If you don't put the code that a book is a novel, for the artificial intelligence, there is a captain called Nemo, who is the commander of a submarine called Nautilus, and at the end of 1800, he went under North Pole. For the machine, he read the facts. So unless we are able to code the information, then we can have an effective tool to say. But now with this AI tools to cover fake news, there was on CNN the day before yesterday a very interesting article that said AI will make it very difficult to differentiate the news from fake news during the US campaign. And now with the campaign overload by the Russian, even those who are supposed to be the expert being bombarded by email, you will not be able anymore to verify in real time. And that is the situation. So we are working with them a lot. Colleagues from the Security Council are coming to our office next week, and we are going to look how to handle this from our point. Approach is the legislative, how national parliament, how international parliament should deal with this, which recommendation and we are not even speaking of directive, but to make it digestible to everyone, we are speaking of criteria, principles, and if possible, come out with the guidelines. I hope that I've answered these 3 questions.
All right, that's fine. And thank you, Ambassador,
Thank you
for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.